today. Today I have a video to share with you that features honeybee stamps and dies. This video is part of a guest post that I'm doing for Honeybee Stamps as their guest designer for January. In this video, I'll be sharing details on how I use little details to create a big impact on a card. This card features a lot of small details that really add that finishing touch to a card and really makes the entire composition pop. So first I'm going to share with you the stamps that I'm going to be using today. These images are from the Country Blooms stamp set, and there are coordinating dies that I'll be using in the project. Here's a look at the stamp set. I've stamped a bunch of the images out onto some white cardstock using Simon's Intense Black ink. I'm not going to be using all of the images, but I did want to stamp everything out to make sure that I had everything I needed in case I wanted to add certain elements to the card. But I knew I wanted to add these particular large clusters of flowers in today's card. I really loved how they're clustered together and they really work perfectly for framing up a sentiment on a card, which is what I'll be doing in this video. So I'm doing my Copic coloring, and the Copic coloring I'm making sure I add contrasting edges on the edges of these images. These images are small, so I'm not going to do very detailed shading, but the shading that I am doing is I'm making sure that I'm adding a very good contrast color along the very edges of the image. And that's going to help give these flowers that extra detail to help them pop off of the card. Having that contrast really brings the lighter colors into focus, and it gives you that highlight that you need to give the flower dimension. So by using just 3 colors on these larger flowers, I was able to create a lot of really great dimension, which helps make these flowers seem more realistic and also gives your card more dimension. Same thing for the yellow flowers. I'm going to be creating that same type of dimension by adding a very good contrast to the edges of the flowers right in the corners where the petals are meeting each other. You can add your boldest shading along any area that you want. I wanted to have that along the edges of the flowers where the shadows would be. But again, you could put the shadows, or in this case the darker color, wherever you feel is perfect for the shading that you're trying to create. For the leaves, I went a little bit more simple with those. I did use 3 colors in spots, but for most of the leaves I only used 2, just because again they were really small. So I wanted to make sure I didn't get too detailed because the simplicity of the leaves will not compete as much with the larger flowers. I want the flowers to be the center focus of this card. So as I'm finishing up the coloring, I'll just mention that I did not color all of the images in this video because that would have made the video quite long. I colored all the images that I'm using in today's card exactly the same way that you're seeing me color these clusters here. So as you see all the flowers here that are colored, I used that same coloring method that I just shared with you. Now the coordinating dies for the large clusters, they are solid. So this does make it a little bit harder to cut with if you're not familiar with using these types of dies. The tip I like to use to get my dies to line up perfectly because they're solid is by die cutting that shape from a piece of scratch paper. For most dies, this will end up working out. I'll rip off a small area of that paper that I've cut. So this is basically letting me create a mask, and it's going to show me where the die is going to end up cutting. I'm now going to fit that die onto our scrap piece. You'll feel this puzzle piece right inside of our scrap piece. That allows me to tape it down onto my paper that I'm going to be die cutting from and slip our little scrap right out from underneath it. That results in a perfectly die cut piece that is perfectly aligned, so that way we don't have to worry about having to stamp onto a piece of die cut paper by die cutting first and then stamping and doing the coloring. I find this is so much easier by die cutting this little mask from some scratch paper and puzzle piecing the die back into place. This has saved me a lot of time, and it's also so much easier to color when you're not having to worry about holding a smaller die cut piece. So I'll repeat this process for cutting out all the other big clusters. I'm now going to pop those clusters up off of a linen cardstock base that I've cut down to an A2 size. I'm using foam tape to be able to adhere these down onto the card base, and I'm layering them together to create a floral arrangement. I'm going to make sure I balance this by adding the other flowers again in that top right. That just helps make sure that the overall appearance is visually balanced and it's not too heavy on one side or the other. I'm also going to tuck some of those smaller elements in and around some of the larger clusters. I'm not going to use all of the ones that I had colored, but I did use quite a few of them, and that helped fill in the floral arrangement perfectly. I'm going to trim off the excess of those larger pieces using my Tim Holtz tonic scissors. These are the mini snips, and I have been using these like crazy. I love them. I also wanted to add some of those tiniest leaves with some liquid glue. Because these are going in the way back and I wanted them to feel like they weren't in the foreground, I wanted them to be in the background, By adding them flush onto the card base, that gives them a little bit of relief behind the popped up elements, which helps give that illusion of dimension. I layered up this painted thanks die with some of the same linen cardstock that my card base is cut from, and a piece of purple cardstock. This die cut is from Simon Says Stamp, and I also used a sentiment stamp set from Simon Says Stamp as well to finish off the sentiment. So I've laid this into a box, and it's hard to see here, but I'm spraying this with some shimmer mist from Imagine Crafts. I love this shimmer mist because it adds this perfect amount of shimmer to your card. I just spray it from about a foot above, and I spray it about 3 or 4 times, and I get the perfect amount of shimmer coating this card. This is an extra little detail that makes your card really pop because the entire thing is covered with a very subtle shimmer that just adds that perfect little sparkle to the card. Now another detail is I love to add sparkling clear sequins in and around different elements, especially floral arrangements. When they catch the light, they create a very beautiful shimmery effect. But because they're clear, they're very subtle, so they hide in the background, especially when you're tucking them slightly behind the floral arrangements. So that's a really great little detail that I love adding to my cards. A final detail I want to add to these cards is by taking some Nouveau crystal drops. These are dimensional embellishments, so they create a really beautiful enamel effect when you add them on top of different elements on your card. I'm using the drops to create a translucent domed effect on the little dots in my floral arrangements. I'm also adding it to the centers of my florals, and that just helps, again, give some dimension to the card, and that extra little detail just makes the centers of the cards really pop and have that beautiful dimensional appearance. Here's a look at how those Nouveau drops look as they're drying. They are a little wet, so they have a little bit of a milky appearance still to them, but once they dry, they will be perfectly clear, as you can see in the photo here. So this card is finished, and I love how adding these little details just really makes these cards step up a notch. I hope this has inspired you to try doing some extra little details on your cards. By adding those extra little details to your cards, you take your cards up one more step in creating something really fantastic and beautiful. If you have any questions on today's video, please leave them in the comment section below, and head on over to my blog where you can get more information on this stamp set that I used from Honeybee Stamps, and also details including still pictures and products used. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more inspiration. If you enjoyed this video, here are a couple more that you might find interesting. Thanks again for stopping by and spending some time with me. I hope I will see you again soon, and have a fabulous day. Bye!